Hey guys, Wolverine here with another draft review. I decided to do this game, 100 Thieves versus Evil Geniuses, because I thought there was a lot of people, even at the pro play level, who thought the 100 Thieves draft was actually pretty good, even though I thought it was really awful, and there was a lot of mistakes made here. So getting into it, we see a Graves first pick from Evil Geniuses, which I think is fine. I wouldn't call Graves an S tier first pick, but he's probably an A tier. Uh, he is a champion who is short range. He either requires the enemy team to be engaging into him, or he needs good setup for his engage. But if he does end up being outranged, he can switch to full lethality and just operate on his Q and ult and work as just a burst combo for the rest of his team who would then be engaging. And in that way, he can play in different ways. So that's what makes him flexible, which makes him a better first pick than a lot of champions, although he still does have weakness. So at this point, if you're 100 Thieves, you see the Graves first pick, you're looking to pick long range. So they do respond with the Ashe and Nidalee, which I think is okay. I don't think it's good. I think Ashe is an overrated early pick because she has problems against range as well. And Nidalee, I think, is just a bad champion, but it does fit what 100 Thieves are trying to do. So overall, not bad. 100 Thieves are in a decent spot right now. The response from Evil Geniuses is Callista Thresh, and I think this is terrible. I think you just lost draft here. I don't think you can come back from this if 100 Thieves actually knows how to respond, because you had the Graves who had the issue of being outranged. 100 Thieves is already looking to outrange you, and then you pick Callista Thresh, who have that issue even more. So 100 Thieves on R3 can lock in so many champions to just ruin your team composition. I'd say you probably want to pick probably Zillion or Viger. Both of those champions can go mid or support. They get Glacial, which is very effective against Callista and even Graves, since Callista loses attack speed when she's slowed. And obviously the Viger Cage or the Zillion Bombs as well as the Zillion E just makes it impossible for these champions to actually play into you. And if you end up sending Zillion support, obviously the Zillion E is like a direct counter to Callista. But instead, what we do see is an R3 Tahm Kench. And the reason this comes out is simply because it's a Callista Thresh, but that's not a good enough reason, considering Tahm Kench is terrible into all of these champions, and terrible with his team and with what his team is trying to do. The only reason he's actually here is simply as an answer to the Thresh queue, and honestly, if you're that insecure about Thresh, you should probably just ban him. But at the same time, if you really want a direct counter to Callista Thresh, like Morgana is open, if you're that scared of getting hooked, Morgana R3 here would be fine. It would help you in this lane, and in the later game, you're still picking a range champion with some form of CC and zone control. It does help your composition, although it's still not a good pick, rather than the Tahm Kench, which actually just hurts you. Now, moving forward, we get into the tier 2 bans. 100 Thieves go for a Azir, which I think is fine, but not good. I think you really need to ban out the Ornn here, since Evil Geniuses really want this Ornn, unless you're taking it on R4, which I don't think is great. And then 100 Thieves take the GP ban second, which I think is really, really awful because you want GP on R4 so badly. GP is probably the best pick in the entire game for 100 Thieves, and they are banning it. If we look at this, we're saying 100 Thieves ban the Ornn because, again, Ornn is super valuable for these champions since all three of these, Callista, Graves, Thresh, none of them are primary engagers, and Callista and Graves really require their team to engage for them so they can actually get in and deal damage. Now, with the Ornn banned, Gangplank on R4 is super great into all these champions. If you've ever watched a Callista try to teamfight into a Gangplank, it is really rough. Teamfight starts, Gangplank ult comes down, suddenly Callista just cannot move and her DPS essentially drops to 0 because, again, slows reduce Callista's attack speed and they reduce like how often she can jump, so she looks really useless when she's slowed, and That's not even accounting for the barrels, which also have a massive slow applied on them, which these champions will be forced to run into. And then you have the Zillion Bombs, the Zillion E, the Ash Volley. They're just not getting anywhere. And again, the Cillian can be replaced with a lot of things. You can take the Viger here, and Viger has better team fights because the Cage is super effective here. He'll also be going Glacial. Glacial, again, obviously very effective against this team. All of these champions are very susceptible to slows. And again, if you're really insecure about the Callista Thresh, you can just take the Morgana on R3. Now, as far as the R4 Gangplank, if you're scared of Evil Genius is responding with Split Push, you can just ban out the Camille here. If you were scared of like a Camille Galio B4, B5, but I don't even think that's actually an issue if they go Camille Galio here. I mean, one, I think you can just play around it well, and it's not actually an issue. This combo is very overrated, but if you're really afraid of it, you can take the GP or the TF R5, and now it's, not a thing anymore. They're never actually making sideline plays with TF ult up, and this is just an unlosable draft. You win at every point in the game, but instead of that, we do see an R4 Galio, and I truly do not know why. Most picks, even if they're bad, like I can figure out a reason for them. Like the Tom Kench is just the response to the Callista Thresh. I guess this is just Galio because it's pro play and they like having map control, but it is terrible into all three of these champions and awful with what your team wants to do. Even just individually, Galio into Thresh, awful. Galio into Callista, awful. Galio into Graves, awful. And if you're actually looking at compositionally, it gets even worse because now you're changing your composition into engage, you're making yourself melee and short range into champions that really, really want you to do that. All of these champions are fantastic at playing against melees. They want to have short range brawls. Ballista obviously super good at kiting you. All of these champions are really afraid of you outranging them and having CC and zone control that doesn't let them move into you. Because if you outrange them, obviously they have to deal with the poke, and they don't have anything currently to sustain the poke unless they pick it on B4, B5. So if you're getting poked down, you're outranged, you don't have a response to the range of the enemy team, that means you're forced to engage. But these champions are also bad at engaging. And if you have anti-engage, like the Zillion Bombs, like the Viger Cage, like the Glacial Slow, it's just not going to happen. And then we look at GPR and GP barrels, it's not even close to being a possible occurrence. These champions are never getting into you. And then you also ban away the Ornn, so what are they even looking at for engage? They maybe take like a Malphite. But it's not enough, because even if Malphite gets the engage, his carries can't actually follow, since they're walking through a GPR and a Viger Cage and GP Barrels and Ash Volley. Now, the response from Evil Geniuses, obviously if you see a R4 Galio with just nothing attached to it, there's no reason for it to be picked. The R5 Camille is a very obvious possibility. I think Evil Geniuses knew this, so you have a lot of options here. You can take away the Camille, which I don't think is good, because then I think the response from 100 Thieves is R5 Jax, which I think is very good, both teamfight-wise, and obviously it outscales the Camille in the sideline, gives your Galio something to play for inside. So I think you would rather just pick something to counter the Camille. I personally would pick the Jax, but Evil Geniuses end up picking the Shen, which I'm also fine with. Shen has a good lane into the Camille and also has the global ult to counter the Galio if he ends up going bot. And 100 Thieves, despite this, still pick the Camille. So, looking at the result of this draft, it is really rough for 100 Thieves. They don't have a single winning lane. None of these lanes are actually awful for them, but they don't have a single winning lane as the team that needs to have a lead in the early game. If nothing happens for 20 minutes, 100 Thieves just lose. They just lose the game. If we look at a just 2-item team fight on even gold, it's not even close. 100 Thieves have no chance. They have no answer to the Corki. They have no way to get onto Callista. Shen obviously does a lot here. Graves does a lot. Thresh does a lot. You just can't fight them. You cannot fight them at 2 items, so you have to get an early lead. But how do you get an early lead when you lose all your lanes? And you have a Nidalee jungle who doesn't have super strong ganks. I mean, you're looking at trying to set up dives, but if evil geniuses are actually good at manipulating waves, you're never getting them. And even if you are getting them, you don't have a good dive target. Like, you're never diving bot lane because they have a Shen, and you're also playing into Callista Thresh. So really your only response is to try and attack the Shen here, but how do you dive a Shen when he has his W versus a Camille Nidalee Galio? Like, even if you're 3-manning, like, if anyone comes to respond, they can 2v3. You're going to have a hard time even 2v1ing a Shen under tower most of the time, and Shen has wave control in this matchup. Now, even if you get Shen a couple times, you get like a 1-2k gold lead. That's not nearly enough. Even if you get like 3-4k, like you're still looking at like an even game. This is ridiculously one-sided draft, even though 100 Thieves actually won it in the first 6. Like it was over from the first 5 picks, and then they R3'd Tom Kench. Now, obviously, what ended up happening this game is Shen ran it down. He died to a Nidalee gank. Then he randomly pushed up and died to like the Camille Galio. And it was seen as like 100 Thieves is a very mobile draft with the Tom Kench ult, with the Camille Galio combo. They just rotate around the map, and like Camille Galio is broken. But that's not actually what happened in the game. Shen just got hard outplayed by Someday, played the early laning phase terribly, randomly died to a gank, randomly died like another 5 times. And of course, if it was on the flip side and like Someday gets solo killed by the Shen, no one is ever saying like Camille Galio sucks because look, Shen just solo killed Camille. But that's because draft understanding is very surface level. So I mean, you see a Shen lose, you see the Camille Galio pop off, and like a lot of people will just lead that to the conclusion that Camille Galio is broken. But even though Shen got smashed in top lane, that wasn't actually what 100 Thieves the game, because again, evil geniuses can go down thousands of gold and still be fine. What really was the problem is they randomly took fights at like 1 item or even less, at like Rift Heralds randomly, when really all they're looking to do is just scale up to 2 items. 2 items is not a very long time to wait. You can fight 2 items to 2.5 items on 100 Thieves, and you are in a winning situation. Again, you can go down thousands of gold by 20 minutes and be perfectly fine. If it goes to 3 items, even better. This team comp is so easy to play, and even if your Shen runs it like he did, you're fine. All you need to do is actually understand how the team comps work, and if Evil Geniuses had an understanding of how these 10 champions work together, they can't lose this game. The problem is they just don't. They don't understand the comps, so they did things that were not in their win con, and that is why they lost.